can actually grow for you an entire empire out there. There are people in the marketplace, who have created empires singularly from their recipes. So intellectual property, in short, is anything that an individual can create from their mind.
And that's it.
That's it.
Pretty much. So let's then come back. Before we then start to ask ourselves what types of intellectual property are there, let's dial it back.
Okay.
Somebody asked, must I be in business for me to start thinking that I can own intellectual property? Must I be a creator myself for me to say, well, this is my intellectual property? When you think about intellectual property, from which perspective do you want to start thinking about it?
Simba, it's from the perspective of, do you have a head?
And that's that.
And is your head sound? It's that simple. Because whenever we try to make it bigger and huge, then we seclude that conversation and we make it a very explicit and a very limiting conversation.
Yes.
Every person has something called thoughts. Thoughts is not a preserve of the few. So the question is, what are you thinking? There is a lady who converted a story about a wizard boy into an empire. How many wizards and witches do we have in Kenya? How many industries could we have developed from, and converted his phrase, are you ready to rumble to a company that is worth 400 million US dollars?
By the way,
what could have Leonard Mambo Mbotela done if Leonard Mambo had known J, who ni Ungwana, was his intellectual property? So creativity happens at different layers of the society. The only thing that people need to understand, anything that comes from your mind, that is the beginning of creativity. So you don't need to be a musician in order for you to create.
Yes.
You don't need to be a rapper in order for you to create. You don't need to be an architect in order for you to create. The only qualification here, my friend Simba, is this. Do you have a head? Is that head sound? Then guess what? You are a candidate for intellectual property.
So direct questions. Now we start to decipher then what intellectual property is really in simpler terms. And this is a direct one. Somebody said, Simba, I've seen a phrase that originated from Kenya in New York, and it was in a train station in New York. Katasimu tupo site.
Yes.
And it is a popular phrase we've seen in the country. And in one way or another, Ogwang, I do not think that that gentleman right there realized that whatever he was doing at that particular point, that was intellectual property in a way.
Yes.
So now it's in New York, and I do not think he's making money out of that particular phrase.
No, it's not.
So let's begin it like that. What should have this gentleman done if he had this ability then to say, wow, this is my intellectual property?
Yes. The gentleman, the only thing you need to do as an individual is to be aware of what you have created.
Yes.
A parent, the first point of being a parent is to be aware that you are expecting to deliver.
Yes.
So in intellectual property, similarly, the moment that phrase took up its own life, the gentleman ought to have owned it that very moment. Every person, particularly in Nairobi, you come across 10 people, you ask, hey, who here has a degree? 9 out of 10 people will lift up their hands. No one ever goes back to say that that academic project you did was your intellectual property. So intellectual property begins from a point of awareness. If I am cooking, what is unique about my recipe? If I am a designer, what is unique about my recipe? This thing is intellectual property. This table is intellectual property. The design of this table should actually have an entire marketplace full of this table. But you'll understand, the design of this table probably is not even aware of the model on this table that person can commercialize. So intellectual property, Simba, is with everyone. The only thing that denies us from taking advantage of our intellectual property is a simple phrase. awareness. Conversations every day. In school, we used to have a guy who would call someone a name and the name would stick. Do you know organizations by phrases? Do you know countries by phrases? Do you know products by phrases? So any person who has something that comes to them effortlessly, whether from a point of a talent or from the point of interest, hobby, this is your pastime.
Or chance,
It is your duty
Yes.
to convert it into an economy. And I'll tell you what, in 1981, there's a band that sang a song, Jambo, Jambo Bwana, habari gani, mzuri sana, right? Since 1980, all the way, when Wazungu come to Kenya, they say, Kenya kuna matata. They actually think that's a greeting. It's a form of greeting. The band that sang that song, Jambo, is the Mushrooms. What is it that Disney identified in Hakuna Matata and Disney said that was intellectual property? So intellectual property is in awareness. Are you aware of that unique thing that you have brought to the marketplace? Are you aware of how your mind, your brain expresses itself? Are you aware of your skill set? Are you aware of your knowledge, your idea? Are you aware of your surroundings?
Yes.
If today I was to say that I'm a Kung Fu master from somewhere called Kwon Lieta, right? And I'm telling you I am Master Kwon Nindomitna, right? You'll be like, you guys, you're a joke. Because there is no validation of Kwon Lieta in my village, right? But if someone comes and tells you I'm Master Guangzhou from Zhuangha, then that one validates his credibility. So intellectual property, let me just mention this. At any given time, whether someone is tall or short, whether someone is plump or slender, whether someone is attractive or ugly, at any given time, an individual has 3 layers of intellectual property. There is intellectual property on how you look. Simba, the way an individual looks, you can create a market entirely out of that. There are organizations that will just be interested on your teeth and your dental structure, right? Every other person in this space has a unique feature. What all of us need to understand is,
Yes.
am I aware of my unique features? There's actually a gentleman in Kenya today who has a lot of advertising business. One day I come to ask myself, what is so unique about this guy? I noticed his eyes are not at the same level. One of his eyes is slightly tilted. And that is his intellectual property. So at any given moment, an individual has 3 layers of intellectual property. There is intellectual property on you and how you look.
Yes.
There is intellectual property in the things you do and how you do them.
Yes.
Then there is intellectual property in your immediate environment. Yes, Simba.
Pretty much. So now that we understand that, the other question that I normally face a lot under intellectual property, even when you see people quite talented in the things that they do without even being aware, is the marketplace for intellectual property.
Amazing.
Fine. I know now that I've got this spectacular thing about me. I've identified my intellectual property through all those levels. Then somebody says, how do I start to commercialize IP? And I want to ask you that question from this perspective. Is it a new thing for many people, especially in the Kenyan economy? Or intellectual property is just this black sea that nobody knows nothing about?
Intellectual property has been with us since the Garden of Eden.
Yes.
Because it's at the Garden of Eden that Adam was told to name everything. So intellectual property begins from the point of whatsoever you name.
Yes.
Katasim tupo sight. What is that? It's a phrase. The gentleman who came up with katasim tupo sight did not direct that phrase into an objective outlet. Today, Katasim would be earning this gentleman ridiculous money.
Everybody is using it across the board.
Everyone is using it.
Even politicians are using it across
Everyone
the board.
is using it.
Yes.
The other one was, Ndani. That was intellectual property. The other day, during electioneering period, Nick Salat came up with another phrase, depict.
Yeah.
The pips,
yes.
that's
another one as well.
intellectual property.
Yeah.
So the first point of having
By the way, even
consumption,
Ricky G, if you...
yes,
but there's a question on that, and I'm going to
no
ask
problem.
you that as well. Yes.
So the first point of consumption is this:
Yes.
is there value in that? Why is it that everyone all over the globe now has that katasim to site? Is there a value out of that? So then that tells you that in the marketplace, value is created at two levels. There is a level of value that is perceived value.
Yes.
If I say katasim to site, people will think, guy, man, you're up to date, you're cool. Eh? So then that one creates a product for the preserve. Hey, boss, you're cool. It's just that simple. Because the person who came up with, and I wouldn't want to mention names,
yes.
right? But the people who came up with what we consume today, the person who perfected incandescent light, the guy did not go to school. The people who perfected the principles of aerodynamics, those two boys did not go to school. So intellectual property helps an individual to begin to define value. At the marketplace, transaction happens singularly on what people conceive as value, what people perceive as value.
Yes.
So whatsoever you've created, whether it's a painting, I interact with a lot of artists. And there's a gentleman called Vincent van Gogh. Vincent van Gogh did a painting early in his life. He's dead for I think the last 100 years.
Yes.
One of his painting goes for $150 million US. Because Vincent van Gogh's painting is not just painting. Vincent van Gogh's painting has marks of value. So the first point, whether in academia, whether in talent, whether in creativity, whether in your hobby, whether in a skill set that someone has, and there is no day you will ever tell me that someone came to this planet empty. No one came to this planet empty. Every one of us, we have something that we can convert and we can grow a market around it. So where does transaction happen? Transaction happens when someone is aware of what they have created,
yes,
and how they can define value in that thing that they have created.
Pretty much. It's a direct question as well then,
yes,
that is going to be sort of like a guideline to
yes,
that. You're speaking to somebody right now, and they're like, by the way, I've got this thing, yes, that I think I might want to consider as IP.
Yes.
Fine.
Yes.
I was watching an interview in one of these media stations across the country. I think it was NTV. They did get the lady who gave the current deputy president the nickname Riggy G.
Yes.
In fact, she said, well, I was the first person to come up with that word, by the way. This word that is getting thrown around right now. I'm the one who came up with it. Watch that interview. I won't go into the basics of the interview. The interview essentially ended on the first question. But anyway. but anyway.
Okay.
Once you have it, then what are the steps that I should take then to protect my IP so that I could lay claim to it as I start the steps of commercializing?
Okay, let me ask. What is Riggy G? Riggy G is a name. Yeah. Any idiot with a mouth can come up with Riggy G. It does not take any, you don't need any peculiarity, yes, to come up with Riggy G.
Yes.
Where people miss it is that people did not attach a point of convergence with Riggy G. What that means, the lady needed to attach anything around Riggy G.
I see.
Can you come up with a caricature of sort around Riggy G? Can you come up with a sound of sort? So that sound becomes your point of transaction. That caricature becomes your point of transaction. That is where everyone misses it. Do you know Vision 2030 came from someone's master's degree? Every person with a master's degree today can actually license a component of their master's degree project to a county or to a state ministry.
Yes.
Where people lack awareness is to attach point of relevance with what you've created.
Yes.
Right? So if today I do, right? At that very instance, that is a scale in music. But you not come and tell me that is the Phrygian scale or that is the Mixolydian scale. No, you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Because you'll simplify it and tell me, isn't that company, right? That is how intellectual property happens. If someone introduces themselves like, hi, my name is Ogwang Omuga, right? And if I was to reverse that and say, hi, my name is Bond, James Bond. Do you know James Bond was very deliberate to convert a template around that greeting, and they licensed that form of greeting to Harvard? How many opportunities do we have in Kenya? How many movies have come through Kenya that the people who created these movies were not even aware of what they were putting out?
You actually even licensed that.
Yes.
Even
Shakespeare has literally put to place a third of UK culture. Shakespeare, from his work. So intellectual property must be from a point of what we can attach relevance to. In Kenya today, when I was born, I was not given that jab.
Yes.
I don't have it.
You know, that would have implications.
I don't have it.
You started saying that you look good, you might wake up tomorrow with things.
No, I'm saying I don't have that jab. Hospital, any facility that uses it, pays China because that is their culture. So intellectual property is amorphous. Everyone has it. In every other place, there is intellectual property. So the only what we are missing is this. If we can attach Rigiji, if that lady had just an image, if that lady just had a caricature, that lady could license that image to people who develop content, and the lady would earn from her house. Now the most she can do is to appear on a TV interview and have nothing to show for it.
Also, I wish we had more time, because I would have asked you, how do you conduct that interview? So how did you come up with that? Anyway, here's the thing, though.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about your institute now.
Yes.
Because then I think IP and commercializing IP is one thing that people need to understand, just to get that awareness then of how to start knowing that indeed you're working money. Should I come to the institute? What am I learning, and what are you taking me through? How long is that gonna take me?
Our main interest is to grow something we call awareness.
Yes.
And intellectual property is conspicuously lacking in the African marketplace. Whether you look at government, you will be shocked. All our emblems are free. Our melody, our national anthem is free.
You're saying that the national anthem is free?
Is free.
Can you imagine
I'm telling you the truth.
Came out the other day.
I'm telling you the truth.
You could actually go right now and claim it.
I'm telling you the truth.
And I asked the government to give you money. You will say it's mine.
Let me tell you, no sports team is taking advantage of the intellectual property. Not Gore, not AFC. AFC in intellectual property is at the same equivalent with Manchester. They have no clue the money they can generate in perpetuity. So what we do with our institution is this. We build intellectual property awareness at individual and corporate levels. Our main importance, our main interest, you will be shocked, Simba. Even media stations in Kenya, no TV station is aware of their intellectual property. No bank in Kenya is aware of the intellectual property. The closest space that is aware of intellectual property is pharmaceuticals. And they're only aware of their intellectual property on the basis of it being adversarial. They protect it, right? So if we are going to change where we are going as a people, if we are going to actualize Vision 2030, if we are going to meet the Big Four agenda and Ruto's agenda, then we need to ask ourselves, can we begin to explore pockets of alternatives, viable alternatives whereby our people can now concentrate on? In Europe, Simba, 97% of the economy is intellectual property. If you ever ask someone who we can say they went to school in Kenya, ask them, hey, what's the backbone of our economy? That idiot will tell you agriculture is the backbone of our economy. And idiot is not an insult.
It's not. I know that. I know that.
Idiot is not an insult. So, Safaricom through M-Pesa money shifting hands is 12 trillion, 4 times our GDP. So in our time, our factor of production is ideas. So any person, if you ever go back to your house in the evening and you don't have an idea, just know you have wasted that day. The thing that all of us should accumulate on a daily basis,
Yes.
whether someone is employed, whether someone is, you're divorced, you're going through a breakup, whether someone is wherever you are, if you go to your house in the evening without an idea, you should not even allow your head to hit your pillow. Because ideas are the seeds from where civilization germinates. This thing was at some point in someone's idea. The person who came up with this thing does not even know what they brought out. This thing can actually build an empire for this person who came up with this design. So at the institution,
Yes.
our interest is one. We want to build intellectual property awareness so we can grow our competitive advantage
Yes.
in the global market space.
Guess what? I'm not going to say that you face some transport issues when you're coming here,
Yes.
because I wish we had more time.
Yes,
okay,
bro.
now the other question is, how many classes then do I need to attend at your institute for me to go through the entire process, come out there knowing that very well now I am ready to face the market? My IP?
Intellectual property is everything. There is intellectual for people in media. There's intellectual for people in banking.
Yes.
There's intellectual property for people in insurance.
Yes.
There's intellectual property for people in music. So intellectual property is not a one-fix-all.
I see.
That is why constantly we have events. And our events are geared around building capacity. I will not sit here and tell you, now Simba, intellectual property is copyright, intellectual property is trademarked. That is
patent
shallow.
and all that.
And that's what I always tell people.
Yes.
Whenever I meet people, people tell me, bro, see intellectual property patent. I tell them, leave that garbage you've read from Google and come get taught to identify what really intellectual property is. Mm-hmm. If someone comes and asks you, who is a lady? And you say, a lady has hips, a lady has... No, those are features of a lady. A lady can be a lady without hips. The same way you can actually have intellectual property without copyright. All these are features of intellectual property.
Yes.
So it's a conversation that we are having. We have an event on the 8th of October called Sink or Swim, particularly for people who are at the marketplace.
Yes.
So that you can come and get learning on how you can deliberately guide your career on intellectual property principles. So it's not a one-stop, it's not a one-size-fits-all conversation. It's a conversation that we're going to have until Jesus returns.
Sink or swim. That is
Sink or swim.
Sink or swim, especially for guys who are in
entrepreneurship or someone in career.
Yes, and guys who want to attend, how can they do it?
You join. I will share with you. I will
Yes.
share with you the credentials, and then you can, at your own pleasure, but we have an event on the 8th of October.
Yes.
It's life transforming.
That's how it's going to be. I mean, if I say anything extra, I think I'll be taking the juice out.